Hi everyone, it's Lisa. Thank you for joining me today. I've been sick, so hopefully I can get through this video without coughing and hacking and stuff. I wanted to share with you, I have a little better example of this. I wanted to share with you a block that I saw. There's no attribution for it. It was just on, somebody had pinned it and it just looked like it had been passed around like, oh, I won't even say what first came to my mind, but it had been passed around, and I don't know who created it. I don't even know what it's called, but I'm basically going to call it a compound star. And I was intrigued by it, and because I'm a newer quilter, one of the things I like to do is look at things and see if I can make them, and how I would go about constructing them. And frankly, I find that to be a very good way to learn and problem solve. It can be frustrating as hell, no question about that, but it does force you to think about things in a very organic way, and that is what propels learning. That's what I've learned in my work life and everything that I've done, and that applies to quilting as well. So when I saw the star, I immediately had to figure out what were the integral pieces of it. And these are the pieces of this particular quilt block. Okay, so for this block, you have to make some decisions about what you want to use for your colors. I would call this fabric A, which is going to be on the outside of this blade. And understand that you could also make this a compound diamond if you would like to do that. I chose not to keep the seam count down. Secondly, you have to make two other choices. So you can call this fabric B and fabric C. So all of these are based on this block size, which is 9.5 finished, and the reason I use that block size is because that works well with 2.5-inch strips without any further cutting. Of course, given that we're doing subcuts here, you could make it anything you like, but this is going into a quilt that has other 9.5-inch finished blocks in it, so I elected to keep the same scheme. So when you're doing that, you have to break up the block and then figure out what your seaming is going to be and what your cutting is going to be. And both are very important. So for my 2.5-inch cut diamond, I need a 1.5-inch strip of fabric A and a 1.5-inch strip of B and a 1.5-inch strip of C. And there are little different strips here for you to view, and that's all you do. You would make your cuts, and it's important that you do this accurately. Now, you might be tempted to think that you can just sew all these together in some configuration and then make your cut, but that's not the case at all, which when you're directionally challenged like me, you have to make test blocks and stuff like that. So if you sew all these together and make a diamond, all you're going to end up with is a striated diamond. Rather, what we're doing is we're going to take our A fabric and put it over there for a moment. For our B and C fabric, we're going to make a strip set, and we're going to carefully sew. I would use a scant 1/4 inch for sewing this strip set so that you have plenty of clearance when it turns over. So go ahead and make your stitch, and then you're going to open it up. Now, this is the same strip set that you're going to be using throughout, but you need to have a a pile, 2 piles of these strips for this reason. Because of the seam push and how these things are going together, it's important that the seaming is such that you have opposing seams. I don't sew my seams open. If you sew your seams open, you won't care. So let's go back to our block here. Let's talk a little bit about the seam push on this block, because it's really one of those mission critical things that you have to think about in the beginning. Otherwise, you will be cursing throughout. And when you're directionally challenged, such as I am, it's kind of a hard thing to do. So first, let's take our sewn together pairs, which is these two here. The seam push for each of these diamonds with fabric A, which is the one on the outside, is always going to be towards fabric A. The seam push for these interior diamonds, you are going to have to alternate them. So half of them will be pushed towards the blue and half will be pushed towards the plaid. And you need that so that when you get to the neighbor, all right, so this seam push is up, you want that seam push to be down so that these nest and they lie flat. So when you're making your strip sets, make 2 sets. Make one strip set where you're pushing towards, in this case, the green, and the second strip set you will be pressing towards the blue, and just make 2 piles of those so that you can keep them straight. Then the very next thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your strip set and then you're going to subcut it. So here's our strip set, and I have subcut it using my 45-degree Creative Grids Diamond Dimensions ruler. You can use any ruler that you like. That works for you, where you have good clean lines. And however you have elected to size your strips, depending on the size of the diamond that you're making, your cut, it doesn't look like a diamond. It's not. It's a rhombus, but it will be a diamond when it's paired with the other fabric. So this width that you're cutting is going to be equal to the width of your strip. These are 2 equal pieces here. So keep that in mind. So then the very next thing that you're going to do is again, cut 2 piles. You're going to have part of these where these seam pushes towards the blue, and then you're going to have another pile where the seam push is towards the plaid. So put them in 2 piles. Now, the other thing to be mindful of is we are now going to have to sew this to a strip and then subcut it again. So there's a little bit of cutting on this, but it really is a darling block, I think, and it's worth the effort. And I'm going to tell you how I do it, and I'm sure that you'll have even more clever ways to accomplish it. Let's look at our block again as a reference. Now, and this might be a Captain Obvious moment, but there's 2 things to be mindful of. We're going to take our 1.5-inch strip, and we're going to take our diamonds, and we are going to lay them down on the strip. So the first thing you need to do is ensure that you leave enough room at the top so that when you make this cut, you don't get your tip cut off. And one way to always check that, this is a 45-degree diamond. If you put, a ruler here, you should get all the way to the end, and you can see that that's not enough. I need to be there. So just you only need to do that once before you realize your folly. But, make a mark. But that's how you check it. Just put your 45-degree on your strip and just make sure the base is going at least through the tip. And then this is going to be your starting point of laying your diamonds. Now, what I like to do is I glue base. So I'll put a bead of glue here, and then I will lay my pieces on the strip all the way down, and you can go nose to nose. I had to get some more strips. You just go nose to nose and just lay them down. Now be mindful of this, another Captain Obvious thing, maybe for you, not so much for me, but whatever point that is facing, if this is north, this is south, your southernmost point is going to be the piece that's on the interior. So just keep that in mind. So if you're doing one set of strips that are like this, give you a little better field of view here. If you're doing one set of strips that are like this, then your next set of strips, you're going to rotate the polarity of them, and we're going to sew them this way. And these should be the ones that have the push towards your plaid. All right. So if you think about this, to make sure that you have your seam push the right way, your seam push should always be this way. All right. So, and that helps it go through the machine a little bit better too. All right, so when we're reversing the polarity for our second pile, if the seams aren't facing south, you're going to have a non-nesting problem. So keep that in mind. So that's just a little tip to help speed you along on this. All right, this is why I like glue basting. My items are glue basted. I know that when I'm under the needle of my machine, nothing is going to shift on me. And the other thing I want to point out is to take particular care of putting a dab of glue right where this point will go, so that you get absolutely no shifting on those points, and it stays down. Now, I'm going to go to my machine, and I'm going to make my perfect scant 1/4 inch. All right, the piece about this, which you have to be careful about, is it's an awkward press. So we have our strip set, and I have sewn it. And now what we need to do is we have to press it towards our A fabric. So remember, this is the long piece, and this is what makes it awkward. All right. Now, one of the reasons why we diagram bias is so we know where we need to be careful. This is bias here. This is straight of grain. This is straight of grain. So if you keep your iron off of this side and onto this, then all should be right with the world. And finger pressing it, I like burnish it with my and I have found that pressing, how well we press really does matter. And I don't have any steam, and I don't I used to use a lot of steam when I first started quilting, but I don't use it so much. I do spray mist, but we're not doing any spray misting. We're not doing any spray misting here. Actually, it's better to approach it from this side towards me. I was doing it in an awkward way. So the best way is the way you're comfortable with. But if you stay right on this, you're off of that biased edge. So you're just going to be careful here. And then you've got, this is going to be in pile A. So let's all of our strips are going to be sewn just this very way, except our next strip set, this strip, our C fabric, is going to reverse polarity here, and the seam push is going to be towards this fabric. Now let's see what we have to do at the cutting table. Careful cutting is very essential at this point. I recommend that you use some sort of triangle ruler that gives you a good, clear point of view of what you're trying to cut. So I just can pick a line on my seam line here and line everything up and make a cut. So using rulers that you're comfortable with and that give you the line of sight that that you need. This isn't my favorite ruler. I'm not sure where my other favorite ruler is, but with my tripod, I've got no room for my Creative Grids Diamond Dimensions ruler, which I prefer for this. So I'm just making these first cuts to trim up one of the polarities of this diamond. I just really, I don't know why I find this this particular pattern so captivating. Again, careful cutting here. Okay, I'm just going to flip this and do the very same thing. I'm going to try to find my other ruler. I'll be back. Actually, this brings up a good point about how you can use and adapt rulers. This happens to be my Tucker Trimmer 1, which is not a triangle ruler, but I'm going to show you a couple of things that make it a choice that I can make for cutting this confidently. I've got a line here that I can line up with the outside of my diamond, and I've got a line up here that I can line up with the top of my diamond. And so long as I can hold this straight. And I've got a new blade in here, and I wanted you to, I hope you saw how that this point shifted, and it's something you need to be careful with when you cut. And I'm just going to cut towards me so it doesn't push in there, but it's a brand new blade in there. And now we have a beautiful unit, seam push always towards this fabric. This is the unit where my push is down, and all of these are. So you're going to go back to, I'm going to go to the 1/2 inch and see what kind of markings I have on this side of the ruler, which I don't have good markings there. So that's I think one of the things to to look for is where you have good lines of sight. Again, this is a 135-degree angle, and look, I've got a 135-degree line here, and just small changes. Get this lined up. Small changes in any kind of angle can mean the difference between good results and poor results. So even though it's a minor shift and you might think it's being overly fussy, it's not. You'll be happy when you're using this and knowing that it's going to line up beautifully for you when you put it in your piece. So it's all okay. That did not shift on me. So looking at different rulers and things in your sewing room, we gravitate towards what we like to use. This is not what I would typically use for what I'm doing here, but and I cut towards me so that I can make sure that doesn't shift through. All right, so now I have the left hand side of the units that I'm using. I also want to point out that using this configuration of 3 fabrics, you can have a solid LeMoyne in the middle, such as this. And if you were to adopt this method, all you would have to do is make the units that we talked about using your fabrics, but the fabric that you want in the middle will always be pointing south when you affix it to fabric A. And this, as you can see, it's just half of one here, would provide a really lovely block with a solid LeMoyne STar framed in fabrics that you enjoy and want to use in this block. And the seam push, because this is towards this block, this fabric C is towards fabric A in each of these, then the seam push in all of these, this is coming this way, this is going out, this is going in, out. So you got a perfect nesting. And in fact, I think that I'm going to use this as one of my blocks in my configuration. But and the rest of it basically goes together like any other LeMoyne STar does. And hopefully that gives you some ideas that you could use if you're using darker fabrics on the outside area. You can use lighter fabrics on the inside. Now the picture that I saw actually had every one of these fabrics was something different. It wasn't fabric A, B, or C. It was fabric A through Z, all put together with a harmonizing element where there was one white diamond on every other one. So it wouldn't be solid in the middle. It was still scrappy, but the unifying element was a white diamond that was, would be here and here, and then on the others. So something to think about if you make this. I hope that you'll let me know, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, I wanted to show you another configuration, and this is just simply taking the same A and B strips, or excuse me, B and C strip sets that we were using before, but rather than cutting them so that they would be married to fabric A, I cut them as standalones. And I wanted to show you how you could configure that within your block and have something that also was interesting looking. So again, I cut my strip sets. I am pressed towards the green fabric here, and it needs to be the obverse of where this seam push is going to be, and it is. And I then just cut out a 2.5-inch diamond. This makes a 2.5-inch strip, and I cut out a 2.5-inch diamond, and then I just interspersed it through. So I'm going to keep that for the quilt that I am making that has these interesting stars in it, and hope that gives you some ideas on what you might be able to do. Okay, I've sewed this together, and I just wanted to show you what it looked like. I think it's really cute, and I want to leave you with this thought. I'm not a scrappy quilter. I appreciate that people are, so you won't see a lot of stuff here about scraps. However, having said that, I love this block so much, and I thought it was so charming to see it renditioned in scraps. And let me tell you where I think this is quite beautiful in terms of concept. Because this 9.5-inch block is using 1.5-inch strips, you know, what do we really use 1.5-inch strips for? Well, if this is a project that you like, then now you can think about using 1.5-inch strips, you know, that are, you know, skinny pieces of binding that didn't quite cut the way they were supposed to. And all you need to do is, you know, starch them and cut them at 1.5 inches, and you can do anything like this. You can use it for these inset blocks, or you can use it for you know, the larger pieces that you see here. And so even though I say I don't like scraps, when I found this block within the last week, I said, oh, you know what, I have a lot of scraps that I can use 1.5 inches for, and I would use that to make these diamonds and to make this block, because I love it so much. And I'm sorry, I just keep going on and on and on about it. And think about everything that you can do, things that you might otherwise throw away, because what do you use 1.5-inch unrelated strips for? Not too many things that I've found in my quilting journey. So I'm gonna make a little box of these things, and let me show you what I have. I was going through my scrap bin, and I have like these neutral strips. I have, that is no way that that's 1.5 inches. And I just cut 1.5-inch strips of things that I had in my scrap bin. I starched them, and I would just use these to do a scrappy type of LeMoyne STar. So this is my way to conquer some of my strips that really don't have a life outside of what I'm doing here. And the other thing that I like using these for is the economy block, and I'll be right back. The nice thing about an economy block is that you can really use some very small strips and make a really cute block. And this can be a corner block in any kind of 9-patch, or it can be a center block. It can be whatever, you know, whatever you like it to be. You can put a peaky and spike in here to make a star block, because this is a square. But I'm going to do a video on how you can cut your scraps and store them so that you can make this paper pieced economy block and not be overwhelmed by scraps, but feel like you've got something that's controlled and you can make something with it.